The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. Leaders in health, housing, and a number of other sectors came together Monday to provide an update on the state of services for people experiencing homelessness in Nanaimo. That was the subject of a close to 3-hour Governance and Priorities Committee meeting at which Nanaimo City Council heard from representatives from BC Housing, Island Health, Snuneymuxw First Nation, the Vancouver Island Regional Library, and others. According to a city staff report, despite increased demand, access to basic needs services in Nanaimo has declined over the past decade. Here's Christy Wood, Manager of Social Planning with the City of Nanaimo, providing an outline of the issue.
We are experiencing an increase in both visibility and the complexity of people experiencing homelessness. And the preliminary numbers from the 2024 point-in-time count led by Snuneymuxw First Nations with community partners estimates that we're closer to approximately 621 people experiencing homelessness, with nearly 70% of them being unsheltered. And as Mr. LaBerge said as well, sector professionals will say that over the course of the year, we're looking at about 800 to 1,000 people experiencing homelessness. And this growing need is really compounded by the loss of key services. So we've, in the last 10 years, lost some very important basic need services within our community. We've lost a drop-in center. We've lost some meal provision. We've lost other shower programs in the past. Our out shop, we've lost a lot of those services and programs.
Wood referenced a point-in-time count, or PIT count. It's a one-day estimate of the number of people experiencing homelessness in a given community. Nanaimo's most recent PIT count was conducted in November, and as you heard Wood say, identified 621 people experiencing homelessness. PIT counts are acknowledged to be undercounts of the actual number of people experiencing homelessness in a given community. Here's Marina White, Health Director of Snuneymuxw First Nation, speaking at Monday's meeting.
One thing that I learned was that some of the homeless don't want to be identified. A lot of the Indigenous homeless, the regulars that showed up for the barbecue, not one of them showed up at the PIT count. And so I was like, why is that? We don't know why, but how do we do the next PIT count? How do we make sure that all of our Indigenous and or any homeless person is counted? And so I watched as I observed, because we were a part of the PIT count. What I noticed was that some people, it's out of fear. Like if you're running from domestic violence or another situation where there's fear, you're not going to want to be counted.
During Monday's meeting, Social Planning Manager Christy Wood spoke to the state of meal and shower services in Nanaimo.
The 710 Breakfast Club's closure in 2021 and the closure of the Salvation Army dining hall at the New Hope Center created a very big gap in daily indoor meal services. And historically, the city has provided bridge funding for that meal provision until other funding sources could be made available. But as you know, no permanent funding source exists for this essential service. Nevertheless, our agencies are very creative to offer that limited meal service through outreach supported by private donations. Due to the ongoing lack of shower and hygiene facilities in this community, the city continues to fund the only shower program for unsheltered or precariously housed individuals at Caledonia Park. And the Caledonia Park program, previously operated by the Unitarian, now operated by Nanaimo Family Life Association, reports that there's been almost a 400 increase of shower usage since 2018, since the city's been funding it there. The Leisure Economic Access Pass, or the LEAP Pass, that the committee will be aware of has been expanded to allow some organizations serving people experiencing homelessness to assist in that adjudication process, which has helped to complement the shower program. So through the program, individuals can access recreational facilities, which means they can also have a shower while they're there as well. So providing access to the LEAP program helps, but options remain really limited, especially for those who are substance affected and cannot manage in a general facility.
Wood spoke there about the LEAP Pass. It stands for Leisure Economic Access Pass. It's a program that provides 50 free admissions per year per person for drop-in swimming, skating, weight rooms, and drop-in gymnasium programs in Nanaimo. To qualify, a person needs to live in Nanaimo and meet one of a number of criteria, such as receiving income assistance or having an annual income of below $23,696 for a single individual. During the meeting, Councillor Paul Manley asked about the program's uptake.
How many passes have been given out, and who's giving out the passes?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Manley. So I'd have to come back with a full report with our Parks, Recreation and Culture partners. But there have been they've been kind of, trialing it as a pilot. And so they started out with a couple of different agencies. The last one that they just uploaded to be kind of an adjudicator was the Nanaimo Family Life Association. And so we've had some initial setup and conversation with them, but be happy to come back to the committee to provide you with some other details, maybe with an update with the shower program, and then maybe we can give an update around the different LEAP passes that are being distributed through these organizations.
Wood said Nanaimo has far fewer funded shelter beds than communities of a similar size, despite identifying a greater need.
Nanaimo has 63 year-round BC Housing funded emergency shelters for adults. There are 8 beds designated for youth under a different ministry funding model. So when looking at the number of individuals enumerated, as I mentioned in the 2024 homeless point in time count for comparison, Nanaimo has shelter capacity for approximately 10% of its need compared to other communities that we often look to for comparison of similar size. So for example, Kelowna with 89% shelter capacity and 67% in Kamloops. For the 2024 and 2025 past winter season, BC Housing also provided an additional 84 seasonal emergency shelter beds and funded an extreme weather response shelter at Harvest Church in partnership with 710 and the Nanaimo SPO. And you'll see from the report as well that service providers have stepped up with funding internally their own beds as well. So for instance, Nanaimo Family Life has 2 emergency shelter beds that they're internally funding. Salvation Army also has 10 beds that they're internally funding as well. And they do report that they've been working closely with BC Housing to expand their capacity throughout their shelters.
John McCormick, Executive Director of the Nanaimo Systems Planning Organization, which is tasked with coordinating the community's response to homelessness, shared the number of times people have been turned away from shelters in the last 3 months.
Over the last 3 months alone, there were 550 times that community members were turned away from shelter spaces. It's a significant thing. I'm going to say that the data on that is not scrubbed to try and make sure that we're not double counting. There may be community members who went to one shelter and then went to another shelter. They got double counted, but the numbers are big.
Wood also shared some figures related to a drop-in hub at 55 Victoria Road with an entrance on Nickel Street. Announced in December, the city has allocated close to $600,000 in funding to the project.
In partnership with the federally funded Reaching Home program and CAB members, the city is partnering to fund a drop-in hub currently operated by Island Crisis Care Society, and the hub offers access to basic needs services such as food, hygiene, supplies, and clothing, and other social and health connections. And between January 2nd and March 31st, the hub has recorded 6,170 visits. It has welcomed at least 156 first-time hub visitors between that time period and provided overnight shelter to 106 different unique individuals. A full review of the hub's operations will be presented to Mayor and Council in early summer for your information. BC Housing is also using the hub as an access point for the province's Heart and Hearth programs as well, linking unsheltered people to supports in temporary housing. And additionally, BC Housing is also funding the 20 temporary overnight shelter beds at the hub, which is operated by Nanaimo Family Life Association. And that funding is temporary. However, we're really grateful for BC Housing to be able to extend that until May 31st, 2025.
Wood spoke there about a temporary overnight shelter at the hub, funding for which had been set to run out. It has since been extended to the end of May. During the meeting, Wood spoke about the annual closure of winter weather-related facilities.
We know that these warming centers have acted as essential lifelines, offering food, clothing, and safe spaces during the coldest months. And we know that after the warming centers close, downtown service providers report a sharp increase in a need for basic needs services. And often unsheltered individuals have nowhere to go and often relocate to doorways or businesses, playgrounds, or parks because of a lack of daytime alternatives. And in the absence of purpose-built or drop-in warming centers, facilities such as our own recreation lobbies and public libraries have been used increasingly, despite not being designed to support individuals with that high level of acuity.
You're listening to Midcoast Morning on CHLY. We're hearing about a Monday Governance and Priorities Committee meeting in Nanaimo, at which the state of basic services for people experiencing homelessness in the community was addressed. Nanaimo City Councillor Hilary Eastmere asked BC Housing's Executive Director and Strategic Advisor on Homelessness, Alison Dunnett, about the temporary winter shelter funding model.
I just wanted to ask about the shelter beds that are currently at the drop-in hub on Victoria Road. I believe that there had been a request from the organization to extend those beds if possible, and so I understand that May 31st is where they're funded up until at this point. Is the intention that the people who are in those shelter beds right now will have the opportunity to move into the hearth sites?
So one of the goals in Heart and Hearth is that shelter should be an access or a gateway to housing. And so anybody who's in shelter right now in Nanaimo can be and would be brought forward to the CAA tenanting table. And if a shelter is soon to close, then that would be a factor driving the prioritization to kind of look at that individual and opportunities to bring them in. We did look at an extension to the hub shelter, given the outcome nobody wants, which is that a shelter shuts, folks are forced to go outside again, and then a couple months later you have housing come online and you essentially force people through an experience of going outside to then come inside again. It's not a good use of their lives and experience, and it's not a good use of partners' time and efforts. So we did provide an extension, to sites to try and move that forward, and we are still monitoring that situation in terms of what can be done.
Okay, so it's uncertain.
It's uncertain if we can do another extension, but it is something that we have looked at. Yeah.
But you're basing that on whether the hearth sites will be ready for the people who are staying in those current shelter beds to be able to move from there into a hearth site without
the goal would be to try and match those things up. It's like trying to land two planes on a runway at the same time. You've got assets coming on. People have been identified for those housing units, and trying to see what we can do, the best that we can do with that. I will just say that temporary winter shelters, which is a program I have responsibility for across the province, we open them every winter, and it is a horrible experience that many of us have to go through in many communities to see those beds close as the weather gets better. And until we can have a shelter system that can provide enough space in every community year round to meet every need year round, it's a reality that partners have to kind of deal with and work with. It's not ideal, but it's the situation we're in at this time.
Is there anything that this council can do to support the landing of those two planes at the same time, just with regards to the drop-in hub and the hearth sites in Nanaimo?
Well, maybe I'll just start with some kudos to this council that there have been strong advocacy through to government around that, which is why the extensions was a factor, and the extensions for sure. And so I think this council's done a great job of highlighting the need and the importance of that. I guess I would say right now with partners, we're working on that the best we can with limited funding and resources to see what we can do.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I know it's a huge credit to the operators in Nanaimo as well, who've been able to step up and advocate and really do that.
They sure have.
And it's an honor for us to be able to support that. And then you talked about the broader issue of, the shelter system across the province. Is it just a funding issue, or like?
There's a myriad of issues at any time when we're trying to support shelter delivery, and the temporary winter shelter program really rests on partnership. So BC Housing has funding through the ministry, and that's who funds the shelter program, and that's who we look to if there's any expansion in the shelter funding that we can offer to communities. And then we're really looking for communities that will step up and identify locations, be supportive through regulatory practices and land use to say, yes, we want to see more shelter, and we're keen to support that. So Temporary Winter Shelter Program is very much a partnership with local governments and local nonprofits. And then capacity, which you mentioned before, is an issue at all times, right? For the shelter sector, is being able to get enough staff on board and keep them on board through that work. So we're always keen to see more temporary shelter become permanent, but we're subject to kind of boundaries on funding that we have.
I think we'd be very interested in helping to advocate for a change to the winter shelter program, because like hearing what you're saying, it's not really working for even the people administering the program, let alone the people accessing it. And it is the fact that we need the long-term sustainable, reliable shelter beds all year round. So I think I'd be interested in a conversation on how to push for the sort of systemic changes to the shelter program. Thank you so much.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada and generous listeners like you. With your support, we can expand Midcoast Morning from 2 to 3 original programs per week to cover local news, current affairs, and arts and culture.
Today on the program, we're recapping a look into services provided for people experiencing homelessness in Nanaimo. At a Governance and Priorities Committee meeting Monday, representatives from a number of groups, including BC Housing, Nanaimo First Nation, Island Health, and the Vancouver Island Regional Library, spoke with Nanaimo City Council about services provided to people experiencing homelessness. Marina White, Health Director with Nanaimo First Nation, says a peer worker the nation has hired for its outreach teams has been making a difference.
So, thinking about all those, because we have great ideas, but I think unless we really work with our homeless and meet them where they're at, we're never going to make a difference. So how do we work with them? And, I think our success that we have had is in Nanaimo is we hired one of our own peer-lived outreach workers, and he is remarkable. And I just came from a meeting with the chief before I came here, and he was like, I'm really proud of the person that we hired. He's pure-lived, and I think he's going on 3 years clean and sober, and now he's giving back to the homeless in Nanaimo. So, in couch surfers, like, how do we address the couch surfers, and how do we address people that are living in overcrowded homes and situations? There's so much to think about. And you're right, Paul. There's a lack of affordability in housing. And so, and then the state of mental health and addictions. A lot of the work that our outreach do is detox treatment referrals. And not just, doing it and then walking away. I see them taking them the full way, getting you to detox. If you don't have a phone to get to detox, we'll get you a phone. If you lose your phone, we're going to get you another phone. If you want detox, we want to get you there. If you want to be on the housing list, you need a phone, so we need to help you get there also.
Jerry Michael, Coordinated Access and Assessment Manager with BC Housing, spoke about various new housing sites coming online in Nanaimo in the coming weeks through the provincial HEARTH program, which stands for Homeless Encampment Action Response Temporary Housing.
3 more HEARTH sites will be opening soon in Nanaimo, including 1300 Island Highway, 1030 Old Victoria Road, welcoming their first residents in the coming weeks. For 1300 Island Highway, local partners through the CA program have already identified 22 prospective residents, with the next meeting of partners May 20th. 1030 Island Highway has 12 prospective residents already identified as well, with the next meeting later this week. The priority for these sites has been supporting individuals currently in shelter, especially those sheltering in the downtown area. The Sparrow, or the former Travel Lodge site, is expected to be receive occupancy later in June, and we'll be working with local partners through the CAA process to identify tenants as we have occupancy firmed up.
Councillor Cheryl Armstrong asked BC Housing representatives about housing options specifically for people in recovery. The response you'll hear is from Jennifer Fox, BC Housing's Regional Director for Vancouver Island.
I sit on the board of the Alano Club, which is for people in recovery. And we have so many in the club that can't find housing because they're in recovery and they don't want to go into supportive housing because they don't want to be around drugs. Or another lady came back from detox, was put back in the supportive housing unit and started using once again because her dealers are there, all her friends are there. Is there going to be a move where we can have what I call second-tier housing, where it's for people that are in recovery that don't need 24/7 supports but still may need weekly supports? I've talked to other people, and this is going back a few years, mind you, where they're sitting in fully supportive housing units. So I don't need to be here, but there's no place for me to go. So we're spending all this money for them to stay in a place where they don't need. If we could have, like I call it, second-tier or phase 2 housing, where you do really well in phase 1. Now you're into phase 2, where you still need some supports. Then finally phase 3.
Through the chair, currently with the supportive housing program and with the Hearth program, it is a housing first, harm reduction philosophy. And so that's where we're meeting folks where they're at to have them come indoors and offering that support if they choose to use substances. With respect to the recovery piece, I'm sure Allison could speak more to this, but there are conversations happening provincially to explore further partnership between the provincial governments for the recovery piece, but within BC Housing's mandate at this time, it is looking for the harm reduction approach.
Councillor Aaron Hemmons asked about whether a new housing site at what used to be the Travelers Lodge on Nelson Road could be thought of as housing for people in recovery.
Following on Councillor Armstrong's question around recovery-focused housing and meeting people where they're at, I agree with her that we need a balance. I'm looking at your slide here that identifies the 78 temporary hearth sites at Sparrow for individuals who are on a path of wellness and stabilization, health and housing needs. Would it be fair to say that that's a recovery-focused facility?
Through the chair, the initial conversation about project was brought forward by SPO with respect to having, this is not my phrase, dry site. And so,
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. What was that?
Dry site.
Dry site, thank you.
That's not BC Housing phrasing. That's how it was presented to BC Housing. We had the opportunity to have lots of collaborative conversation about how can we fit concepts of that model within the funding program framework that BC Housing delivers within, which is that harm reduction. We were able to arrive at the CAA process in terms of how we select who moves into the Sparrow. And so the Sparrow is identified for persons who are looking to reduce exposure to substance use and alcohol. And through the CAA process and the housing options coming online, it is unofficially a bit of a tiered process in itself in terms of some sites are much lower barrier perhaps for people with maybe higher needs. And then we have other sites that are maybe not as acute in terms of their support needs. And that would be the Sparrow. That would fall under that category.
Monday's meeting also featured a presentation from Eileen Gillette, Director of Public Services and Planning at the Vancouver Island Regional Library.
I think it's important to note a lot of people can't afford data plans on their phones, and we hear that a lot. So they come into the library to use the Wi-Fi, as well as they don't have computers. So if you think of all the forms that one may need for government, housing, health, they come to the library and they use that, as well as our printing services. So we work with a lot of folks. We talk to people, as well as digital literacy, how to use a mouse. We offer a lot of one-on-one help. So that service alone is essential. Partnerships, we can't do it alone, and I hear that a lot today, right? Everyone is welcome during our open hours, during, the heat, the cold, and the rain. We take safety and security concerns seriously, and we're constantly looking at employing new technologies and staff training and key partnerships. And some examples of the safe spaces is we had a $50,000 Island Health grant for Brave overdose detection sensors that were put in our high-risk branches. It detects when there's no motion and alerts staff. So it's used to prevent opioid poisoning, but also it saved us a lot of staff time, right? It was part of almost our schedule and checking the washrooms, because in our spaces, washrooms are generally where the most incidents take place. Again, public washrooms in the community. We have a security guards in our high-risk branches as well. And this is a relatively new expense for the library. Right? This is something we didn't have before. We have rules of conduct, guidance on expected behavior. Most libraries that like visits go without incident, yet they do happen. And when they do, we do take them seriously. I like to add too, when we talk about space, is relationships. We have people who come in our doors every day. We know their names. We know when they have good days. We know when they have bad days. And I'm constantly encouraging service providers to come into our space, because I think we're sharing a lot of the folks.
Councillor Erin Hemmons, who serves as chair of the Vancouver Island Regional Library's Board of Trustees, spoke about the library's increase in spending on security.
One of the things that I find so important about the libraries in this conversation is that you're not providing housing, you're not providing shelter, you're not providing food, you're not providing social services, but you are one of the very few places with an open door with a mandate to be free for everyone. That includes Wi-Fi, that includes washrooms, that includes services for helping to find jobs. So I just think the library continues to punch above its weight, and I want to thank you for that. I find your presentation quite gracious in the challenges that you're facing, and I just want to put a figure to Councillor Manley in terms of the security, because I'll just be blunt about it. So since 2020, pre-2020, the Vancouver Island Regional Library did not have a budget item for security. We're now edging close to $1 million. So Director Gillette is being very graceful here. It continues to be a challenge for the library, and the library, I think, continues to handle it very graciously, so thank you.
Monday's Governance and Priorities Committee meeting also included a presentation from Island Health. You can watch the full 3-hour version of the meeting on the City of Nanaimo's website. Councillors Ian Thorpe and Tyler Brown were not present at the meeting. All other councillors were in attendance. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and RB Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. This program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Snuneymuxw First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.